Jasmine Gurley, and welcome to Morehouse College. How you feeling? Let me tell you, this is going to be an amazing evening. Intellectual conversations, a little bit of spiciness in maybe some of the thoughts that are shared, but this is the conversations that need to be had for such a time as this. And I say that with all puns intended. Okay? I have the honor of serving as a Senior Director of Brand Marketing and Communications and Press Secretary to the one and the only Dr. David A. Thomas, 12th President of Morehouse College. Can we give it up for Dr. Thomas? Thank you very much. But I also have the honor of introducing our other guests of the college for today. So we're going to start with Malcolm in the middle right here. Mr. Malcolm Gladwell, 5-time New York Times best-selling author, host of Revisionist History podcast and Broken Record podcast, and a Time 100 most influential person. Ladies and gentlemen, Malcolm Gladwell. Now we need to give it up for the 14th president of Hope College, President Matthew Scoggin. And finally, my president, your president because you're at Morehouse right now, Dr. David A. Thomas, the 12th president of Morehouse College, taking his last lap before retirement. Gentlemen, have a great time. And you too.
I'm Malcolm Gladwell. My job is to be the moderator this evening. So I just wanted to say hello to all of you. Thank you for coming. I think we're in for a fascinating conversation. I wanted to very briefly say why we're here. I, a couple of years back, heard about an experiment that Matt Scoggin was running at the college of which he's the president, Hope College, and I went out to see him and became a convert. And I joke with him that I now have a part-time job as Matt's PR person. And we were chatting late last year, and we were talking about, I said to him, you should take your show on the road. And where should we go, we asked each other, and we came up with the idea that we should really come here. That there was a natural affinity between the type of institution that Matt runs in Western Michigan, Hope, and Morehouse. Small, elite, mission-driven places that, and in my experience, it is those kinds of institutions where revolutions begin. So what I wanted to do was just start with Matt. Matt, tell us what you are doing at Hope College, and tell us why you think what you're doing there would be of interest here in Atlanta on the campus of Morehouse.
Thanks, Malcolm, and thanks everybody for coming out this evening. President Thomas, thank you for hosting us at Morehouse. It's been, we've got a team here with a few students, some of our trustees are here. We've had a great afternoon on your campus. I didn't know this ahead of time, but thank you for making sure that this event lands on a Wednesday, because Wednesday at Morehouse is Fried Chicken Wednesday. Which of course is what we had for lunch. And your president told us ahead of time that the fried chicken here is the best fried chicken in the world. And you're not wrong. It was really, really good. So thank you for that. I'm thinking about coming back for Fish Friday. Is that right? So, or maybe I could just stay for the next couple of days. Anyway, thank you for hosting us. It's really, really an honor and a privilege to be here. So I'll start with what we're doing at Hope, and then talk about, I think, why there's a really interesting connection here with Morehouse. We set out about 3.5 years ago to completely reimagine how students can fund their college education. And I think there's widespread recognition in society that the business model, the financial model of higher education is broken. And that's manifesting itself in a number of ways. One way that is manifesting itself is that higher ed as a sector, this is not true of Morehouse, but higher ed as a sector is way over-serving wealthy students and wealthy families. And Raj Chetty's latest work, by the way, shows that students who come from the very top earners have nearly a 100% chance of going to college, and students who come from the bottom portion of earners have a 30% chance. So we're really bifurcating our country, and there's a growing opportunity gap. So we set out to solve that puzzle, at least for our college, for Hope College. And the way we set out to solve this is by flipping the funding model on its head completely. And we basically said, you know, the way to ensure that tuition is no longer a barrier to entry, and the way to ensure that there's not cost discrimination between wealthy and poor students is to set the price at zero, to not charge tuition. And that's what we're attempting to do, is to not charge tuition. Well, that then, of course, leads you to the question of, okay, well, that sounds like a great idea, but how in the world do you fund the place? And I actually think the public policy conversation that we're largely having is a misguided public policy conversation, because what we're talking about is, should college be free or not? And the reality is it's never going to be free. The kind of education that we do at places like Morehouse and Hope is always going to be very expensive, because the model of education that we have is a very high-touch model, and that by definition is going to be very expensive. So it can't possibly be free. The question we ought to ask is, who should pay for it and when? And so our idea is, what if students could pay, but what if they could pay when they're actually in their earnings years? And what if they could pay not by funding it through tuition bills or debt, but what if they could pay through philanthropic gifts? And so the idea that we've been piloting for the last 3.5 years or so is called Hope Forward, and it's essentially a pay-it-forward model for thinking about how students can fund their education. The reason I think it's really interesting for us to be here at Morehouse is, obviously our schools are different in a lot of ways, but we also have some similarities. And one of the things that we have in common is that we're both very mission-driven institutions. We're a Christian college. We're a college that has a Christian mission. And for us, we want to take that seriously, and we want to have a Christian mission that's defined and actionable. And we actually think that what it means to be a Christian college ought to manifest itself in our structures and our business model. And so this Hope Forward idea, yes, I think it's an interesting idea to reimagine how higher education is funded. For us, it's actually quite simply a way to live out our faith, to live out our Christian mission. The hub of it is based on a verse from the Bible. It's Matthew 10:8, where Jesus says, "Freely you've received, now freely give." And we had this epiphany as we were talking about this, and the epiphany was, holy smokes, what if we actually applied that truth of Jesus, not just to our personal lives, but to our structure, to our actual business model? And that's what we've set out to do. Obviously, Morehouse has a different mission than us, but as I said, what we have in common, I think, is that we're both very mission-driven institutions. We know who we are, and there's a lot of institutions in higher ed and elsewhere that are kind of still trying to figure out who they are. They're still looking for their identity, and I think it's going to take places like Hope and Morehouse, who have this strong sense of missional purpose, to be the ones who lead the way through this affordability crisis in higher education. And Malcolm, your work has, I don't think innovation comes from the top of the pyramid. So I don't think we should look for the sort of the name brand institutions to really lead us through it. I think it's going to take places like Hope and Morehouse to step up and show leadership, and that's
so
precisely what you've done.
You don't think we're name brands?
Well, I think we're name brands, but
I do too.
I'm not sure everybody would agree with that.
Dr. Thomas, I have many things I want to ask you about, but before you respond directly to Matt's idea on what's going on at Hope, I wanted you to take a step back. You're someone who, you said earlier, you said before, your first job in academia was in 1981?
1981.
So You've been observing for almost 45 years.
Yeah.
At what point over that 45 years did it occur to you, this institution that I've given my life to is in crisis?
The institution being higher education?
Yeah, broader, this profession that I've given myself.
Probably 10 years ago, when I was dean at Georgetown. The crisis of confidence in higher education became clear to me, and the challenges of affordability became very clear to me.
And when you say the challenges of affordability became clear to you, you were at Georgetown, an exceedingly wealthy school with a lot of very wealthy students, and even there, you saw a crisis of affordability.
Yeah, even there I saw a crisis of affordability. Because the Georgetown had lots of wealthy people, but not a lot of institutional wealth. So their endowment is not even among the 100 biggest endowments in the country. You could see the ways in which that was constraining what they could do, especially after they made the commitment to be need blind. I think that's essential for any school that wants to provide a high quality education and attract the best students. That's one of my goals for Morehouse, for us to be need blind and debt free. Because I think that's essential to attract the best students and to make the education affordable.
And over the last 10 years, how have your feelings about this affordability crisis evolved? Are you more worried or concerned today than you were 10 years ago?
Oh yeah, more worried, and part of that, right, is context. So at Morehouse, roughly 50% of our students are Pell eligible. That means that they come from families that are in the lower economic strata, and families that can afford to pay roughly no more than $5,000 toward their education. And many of them are coming from families with multiple children. And just to give you a contrast, I sit on the board of Yale University, and we sit in board meetings and announce with great pride there that 19% of the students admitted this past year were Pell eligible. And I sit there thinking, you know, try 50%, right? And then you sit and you watch the craziness going on in Washington. And it just makes it a much more acute kind of fear and pain than I felt when I was at Georgetown, where 15% of the students might have been Pell eligible.
Yeah. Matt, tell me a little bit about the evolution of your feelings about this crisis. You have now been president at Hope for how many years?
6.
6. What's changed between year 1 and year 6 in terms of your own feelings about what's going on in the world in the higher education world?
My feelings haven't changed, but I think actually I think over the last 6 years the problem has gotten more serious. And you know, I mean, I think we have an affordability crisis in this country, period. The things that matter most, working class families can't afford. Can't afford housing, can't afford healthcare, can't afford education. And we generally feel okay about that because we can afford flat screen TVs and phones and Netflix. And so we generally feel like, well, the economy must be doing okay. But there's a massive affordability crisis. And when it comes to higher education, it's an opportunity gap crisis. And I think, you know, I mean, amid the movement to make America great again, it seems to me that there's a studied indifference to what made America great in the first place. And what has made us great, you know, our secret is no secret at all. It's long been written on the Statue of Liberty. Our secret is bring us your huddled masses. You're poor, you're tired. That's who we want. We want your poor and you're tired and your huddled masses. And the question is why? Why are we basically saying to the world, give us your leftovers? It's not necessarily altruism. It's that we have a conviction that in those huddled masses are people with incredible talent And if that talent is harnessed and developed and given the opportunity, there are people there who can invent the cure to cancer, who can make discoveries that will make all of our lives better. And that's the American dream. That's why we call this place the land of opportunity, not the land of talent. We don't necessarily have more talent here. We've always been a place that has made room for talent. And there's a massive crisis when it comes to opportunity, and I think higher education holds the key, just period holds the key to solving that puzzle. That's why I reference the, over-serving the wealthy populations and leaving the middle class and the low-income populations out of higher education is a problem. It's a problem for our democracy. It's a problem for all of our future success. And this is something we've got to own together. I don't think it's not necessarily just going to be solved in the public sector. I think it's going to take institutions like ours stepping up to lead. I think it's going to take philanthropy. It's going to take the private sector. It's going to take nonprofits. It's going to take a wholehearted effort from our society to come together and say, if we want this country to really be the land of opportunity, we've got to make sure that there is access to education.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Thomas, before we move to the question of solutions and what goes through your mind as president of Morehouse when you think about trying to address this problem, I want you just to, for a moment, dwell on what does the affordability crisis mean for the students of Morehouse? How does it change the way who gets educated? How does it change how an education is received? How does it change how they go out in the world? Seeing?
Well, one, I think, at least if I take a long horizon on it, I think today students are much more concerned about how much money they will make when they leave than they were 15 or 20 years ago. We actually had a kind of experiment happen here at Morehouse College. In 2019, philanthropist Robert Smith gave the commencement speech, and he concluded by saying that he would relieve all the debt of the 400 young men who were graduating. We've now done some follow-up with those young men, and a number of them report that they left Morehouse and took jobs based on their passion and not just on their paycheck. And I'm a firm believer that if you apply yourself to where your passions lie, you're much more likely to do well and to make a greater contribution that serves the world. And that's what our mission is here at Morehouse, to produce men with disciplined minds who will lead lives of leadership and service in the world. So we literally saw our students make choices because they didn't have that burden of debt. The other factor that we see is families run out of money and debt capacity, because a lot of our students, their families so badly want them to come to Morehouse and finish Morehouse that they will literally take on the equivalent of a second mortgage to put a student through a Morehouse college. And all they need is one parent to lose their job and their credit score tanks, and they can't get credit to support that student to go through the last 2 years of Morehouse. And it creates an attrition problem for the student. We've been seeing that. And students talk to me much more than they used to about their feelings of responsibility and in some cases guilt that their parents are, their families are taking on such a burden for them. And it influences their choices.
What was your experience as a college student?
So my experience is interesting. So my story, very briefly, is I always wanted to go to Morehouse from the time I was 10 years old because I read Martin Luther King had gone to Morehouse. Nobody in my family had gone to college. I didn't know anybody who had gone to college. My father told me if I went to college, I wouldn't have to do what he did, and he did really hard jobs. Fast forward, I only applied to 2 colleges. When I'm 17 years old, I applied to Morehouse, and I applied to a school that I had barely heard of called Yale. I got into both. Morehouse had lots of talented young men who looked like me and on paper looked smarter than me, gave them all the scholarship money, didn't give me any. Yale gave me a full ride. Their pipeline of talent was not as good as Morehouse's, and they were at the start of their journey to try and bring more African Americans to Yale. My father, practical guy, basically said, hey, I know you have this romantic thing about Morehouse, but their 0, my 0, your 0, that's 0. My 0, your 0, and Yale's full ride, that's a full ride. I know I didn't raise no fool, follow the money. So I went to Yale. And
It's safe to say that's a fairly atypical college application process. You had 2 and 0, and you got full ride at 1.
I went 2 and 0, and I got a full ride at 1. I'll say, I didn't do badly going to Yale, but I think I would have done much better had I gone to Morehouse, now that I've been president here for 7 years. Just the difference that this environment makes in the development of a young black man at the prime of his development and becoming a man. When I was at Yale, I always felt like I was visiting someone else's house. And I know what it feels like when you're in your house. That's what Morehouse feels like for these young men. This is their house. You develop the mentality of an owner, and that influences how you approach the world in every way. Mm-hmm.
Matt, I'll come back to you. You made a comment about how the thing that Morehouse and Hope have in common is they know who they are. You're proposing a really radical way of restructuring the way we pay for college. And I'm curious, do the institutions who make this leap need to know who they are? Can I do this at any old place? Can this be a way of paying for college that eventually spreads to all American universities? Or does it only work at places like this or Hope?
You asked me that 2 years ago when we were together once, and my answer 2 years ago was yes. I think it can work anywhere, and I've changed my answer. I think you need. I think it could
First
work.
of all, I love that you remember a question I asked you 2 years ago.
The question is, could this pay it forward model work at any old place? And I think it could work at some places, but not all places, because I think you need a place with that sense of. With some strong sense of identity, with some strong sense of mission, you need to cultivate. If it's essentially what we're trying to do is shift the business model from one based on paying to one based on giving. And so, if you're moving toward an entirely a system based entirely on generosity, I'm not sure that can work anywhere. I think you need a very strong ethos. I think you need a very strong sense of missional identity behind it. I don't think it necessarily has to be a Christian institution. You don't have to be a Christian to believe in generosity, for sure. But I think you have to have some strong sense of identity. And I think we're seeing now in higher ed, places are, like I said, places are kind of shifting. You can't be a place that shifts with culture. You can't be a place that shifts with the political tide will change every 4 or 8 years. And to do something like what we're doing, which, another way of thinking about what we're doing is a sort of a crowd-funded model. So once we're fully living into it, and we're only 3.5 years into this with a small portion of our student body, but once we're fully living into it, it's basically a crowd-funded model so that our students aren't paying, our alumni are giving gifts to fund their education. So our alumni are crowdfunding our current students. And I think to be a place that can pull that off, you have to have a firm foundation that endures through years, that endures through different political tides, through different cultural tides. And I think that has to come from a place that has a strong sense of identity.
Yeah, I thought of that when I have a cousin who did her undergraduate at George Washington University and went to law school at Howard. And I realize I'm not supposed to say nice things about Howard here at Morehouse, but if you'll forgive me. And she said if she had known what it was like to go to an HBCU when she was an undergrad, she never would have gone to George Washington. And I realized she's someone who would give. She'll give to Howard, she won't give to GW, because there was some difference, some real difference in the way she felt about that institution. And is that, when you think about that, how well do you think Morehouse leverages that feeling right now amongst its alumni?
Well, I've been trying to leverage it more in my 7 years here, but with much less success than I would have hoped by now. What I often say when I speak to Morehouse alums is that Morehouse did a fabulous job teaching obligation, meaning you come to Morehouse, you're obligated to go out in the world and make a difference. We've done a terrible job at teaching gratitude. In other words, the reason you can make that difference is because you came here and you should be grateful. In the same way that hospitals have grateful patients, our students should be more grateful for what Morehouse gave them and take more responsibility for perpetuating the institution into the future. And what I love about what Matt is doing at Hope is that it will instill gratitude. That motto, I go to school, tuition free, and the expectation is that I should give in return for the gift that I was giving. That also creates a dynamic of sustainability. So we have not leveraged, in my view, the sentiment or the mechanisms to create a real sense of gratitude, deep gratitude in our alumni body, in the way that other institutions have. The sort of gold standard for alumni giving is 40% of your alumni give every year. We're below 20%, as are the overwhelming majority of historically black colleges and universities. And I see Michael Lobax, the head of the UNCF, which is a large association of historically black colleges here in the US. So he probably knows the stats even better than I do. But I think in general, our institutions have not done a good job, with a couple of exceptions, building that sense of gratitude and responsibility. I know it's one area in which my grade card is not great, because I have not shifted it here at Morehouse to the extent that I had hoped.
One cool thing that we're learning, speaking of gratitude, and the research is so clear on this, the best way to spur on an attitude of gratitude, sorry for the rhyme, it's so cheesy, but the best way to spur on a sense of gratitude is to start by giving someone a gift. Because like Dr. Thomas, if I give you a gift, you're a nice guy, I know it. You gave me a gift today, the fried chicken. If I give you a gift, your immediate response is, that's nice, I should give Matt a gift in return. And then all of a sudden, our relationship is based on generosity and gratitude. And part of our, the whole world is trying to figure out, why in the world does our culture feel so entitled? Why is everyone asking, what can I take from the world rather than what can I give to make the world a better place? And part of our conviction is, what if we just started it off by giving a gift? And we're literally, quite literally giving our students an education, and it comes with the expectation that they give in return. But what we're learning is that something really powerful happens when you start by giving a gift. And this is, we're 3.5 years into this. We have 120 students as part of this pilot, so the data is limited, I know that. But one of the things that has totally blown our minds is that of these 120 students, and they're all current college students, 71% of them are actively giving to our college right now while they're students. That doesn't happen. What kind of current college student gives to their college when they're still taking classes? And I think something really profound happens when you shift from being a payer to a giver. And we're in the early years of really learning what this can do to powerfully transform the kind of relationship that we as a college have with our students.
Matt, following up on that, suppose down the line there will be a new president of Morehouse pretty soon. That's correct, right?
Yeah, hopefully by the end of June. I'm retiring.
Yeah.
So
do we know who it is yet, or is it unknown?
I don't.
You don't. So
Could
let's
be
call
anyone. It could.
Dr. X, the new president of Morehouse, calls you up, Matt, on July 1st, and says, I happened to be in the audience when you came to campus. I'm really, someone out there.
Possible you're here.
I'm really interested in what you were talking about. What advice can you give me if I wanted to do a version of Hope Forward here at Morehouse? What are your top 3 pieces of advice to the incoming president if they wanted to follow what you guys are doing?
The first piece of advice is change like this, and this is radical change. Change like this takes time. It takes time, and we live in such an impatient culture. We live in a culture that wants immediate results, and it's going to take time. And I think I'm learning that, and I'm an impatient person, so in some ways I'm learning it the hard way. I remember Michael Crow, who's the president of Arizona State, and he has led that institution through really dramatic change and innovation. And he said it took him 15 years from start to finish to lead through that change. And he further said that the first 6 to 8 years, his biggest hurdle was skepticism. This can't work. This is impossible. And so if it takes 6 to 8 years just to jump over the hurdle of skepticism, you got to gear up for something that's going to take a long time. And I think that's the first thing, is realize you're a runner, that this is a marathon, or maybe an ultra marathon. This is not a sprint. And so I guess that's the first piece of advice, is gear up for the long haul. Second piece of advice would be, I think colleges are somewhat complicated institutions because there are so many stakeholders, and in some ways the president has the title of president, but in some ways our authority is pretty limited. The faculty have a lot of authority, donors have authority, students have authority, and so to get anything done, much less something big like what we're trying to do, you've got to build a really broad coalition. And again, that will take time. So you'll feel like you're spending so much time telling the same story over and over again and trying to get people on board. But I think that's the only way with institutions like colleges are set up with shared governance. We're set up to have lots of checks and balances. And so I think you got to gear up for the long haul. You got to get ready to do the slow, tedious work of building a big coalition. And then I think the reality is you got to raise money. Fundraising. You got to learn how to raise money to fund these institutions. And if we're gonna flip the model on its head, I mean, basically what we're trying to do is raise a pot of capital up front that will allow us to fund those transition years. And
give us a sense. You're an institution that's how big, and how much do you think you need to raise to get this thing off the ground?
So yeah, thanks. Don't laugh at me. So our institution, we have 3,400 students. Right now we have 120 students on this pilot. Our endowment is about $300 million. We would like to have an endowment of over $1 billion, and if we get to that level, we think we can flip a switch from the tuition-based model to this pay-it-forward model, and our institution can stay on that model forever. In other words, that would allow us to flip to this pay-it-forward model. I don't know that it would be a traditional endowment. It may be an endowment that we sort of spend down over time, because as we build this, we'll have alumni who are giving. So I don't know that we necessarily need to have an endowment that's sustained at that level forever, but the modeling we've done shows that once you raise that amount of capital up front, you can sustain it for a very, very long time. So that's the magnitude of what we're essentially trying to pull off. I mean, this is sort of back of the envelope math, but there's 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. If each of them roughly had $1 billion, most places could pull off something like this. Maybe not forever, but depending on the size of your institution, you could pull it off for a very long time. Look at Albert Einstein College in New York last year, got $1 billion gift to go tuition free. So 4,000 colleges, let's assume that all of them need roughly $1 billion. Well, the top 1% in this country own over $50 trillion of net worth. So it would basically take $4 trillion. We could have this problem solved by the end of the month. It's March 26th, so we've got 4 days to do it. Let's go. And I think if we really wanted to, this country could come together and solve the access problem for higher education. Yeah. But it's going to take that level of, it's going to take an army of philanthropists to pull this off.
I remember reading a quote from Jeff Bezos, world's second or third richest man, and he was asked why he was spending so much money trying to send a spaceship to Mars, and he said that of all the things he could think of doing with his wealth, that was the single most interesting. And I thought, this is a man without an imagination. But so that you do have the problem of imagination. So, Dr. Thomas, talk a little bit about your response to what Matt's saying. Speak hypothetically to your successor. What do you think this is a kind of idea that could work here at Morehouse?
I could imagine it working. It's a bold idea. And as I listen to Matt talk about it and have tried to get my head around what he's doing, because no place else in the country that I know of has even attempted this. It actually starts with, if we think about how higher education has moved, it's moved from families pay, back in the old days, to some combination of family and government pays. And now we have to move to donor pays. And Matt's biblical metaphor about gift giving, it works. And I think it starts with that new president really getting together their story about Morehouse as a gift that is worth giving, and getting donors connected with what you're doing is giving a gift to the generations to come, right? That's what motivates. There's something about what people experienced as students at Hope or parents of Hope students that has them getting behind what Matt's doing. And if I were starting over, I would be much more conscious of helping to educate my community about Morehouse is a gift that we have to keep giving to the world. And we've got to give it in a more powerful way than we have in the past. If we stay tuition-driven, tuition-dependent, we won't be able to do it in a powerful way, because we won't be able to give the gift to as many people as deserve it. So getting that story is the first thing, I think. And then being willing to step out with the bold idea, because then you're also changing people's attitude. Like people don't think of education as something that we should give away as free, right? And how do you get people to think differently about that? That we should be giving this away, to Matt's point as well, about what has made this country great. And you can track the greatness of this country to the rise initially of public education, which, by the way, only took off after slavery. The more diversity that flowed into the policy-making realms of the country because of that led to the opening up, sponsoring of public education.
Dr.
And
Thomas.
so anyway, you know, we have to work on that and continue to work on getting our constituencies, our alumni, our friends, current students, to see supporting the college as donors to be critical to the way they saw their service to the world.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you were speaking when we were chatting backstage, you were saying that Morehouse is currently oversubscribed.
Right.
And you're seeing an increase in not just the number of students coming here, but the quality of students coming here.
Yep.
The kind of academic quality of
Right.
student. Does that make the job of making of shifting to some revolutionary idea, as Matt is describing, easier or harder? Because I can see how an argument with someone saying, the school's doing great right now. Why do you want to mix things up?
Getting more academically prepared students should make the job easier, because they'll leave and they'll do well. We also have a correlation. It's true for the general population. It's also true for the population we serve, Black families primarily. And that is, where students are better prepared academically, they usually come from families with more means. So it should make the job easier. And the case that we would be making if we went with a model like Matt's is that the first students that we would target with a program like Matt's would be those students with the least capacity to pay and the highest academic potential. So we're giving great students a great education that is a gift to them and a gift to the world. I think we could probably get that case to fly more easily than if we were to even just say Morehouse is free, right? So right now, you know, one of my long-term goals is that Morehouse reaches a $1 billion endowment, because we've already ran some numbers that would show that we could create a Morehouse that would be debt-free if we had a $1 billion endowment. Every student could go through Morehouse without taking any student debt. Unlike Matt, that's been the extent of my revolutionary thinking.
I don't know about that. You're doing a lot of amazing things. I do think I don't know that we want to say it's free, because like I said, it's still very expensive. And so the question is, who's going to pay for it and when? I think there's something really cool that happens when we say to our students, we're expecting you to give after you graduate. And what we're implicitly saying to our students then is, we know that you are going to be successful. We're betting on your success so much that we are placing the future of this institution in your hands. And talk about giving a student worth. Talking about giving a student a sense of, whoa, like this place believes in me. talk about giving, it's hope. We're giving that student a sense of hope. And I think at the end of the day, that's the purpose of higher education. I know I'm biased in saying that because the name of my institution is Hope. But I think our purpose is to be, at the end of the day, to be incubators of hope, to form students who are problem solvers. And part of what, and I think I'm just scratching the tip of the iceberg in terms of really understanding the power of this. But when we say to our students, we're expecting you to give, and they hear that as, you know I'm going to be successful. And we've had students say, no one has ever believed in me this much. You believe in me so much that you're placing literally placing the future of this institution in my hands. And that's, I didn't expect to be so moved by that. And I think, so yeah, I think I don't think we want to say it's free. There's a sociologist at UC Merced, her name is Laura Hamilton. I've never met her. She wrote a paper 12 years ago that no one paid attention to, but I found it. And then she wrote a book. She wrote a book about the paper, and her book is called Paying for the Party. And her research, this is so crazy. Her research shows that the more your parents pay for your college, on average, the lower your grades are. So there's this inverse correlation between the amount of money your parents pay for college and your grades, which is why the book is called Paying for the Party. She's basically saying what you parents are subsidizing is your kid is goofing off because they have no sense of investment in their education. Their parents have paid for their education. And I think part of what we can do with a pay it forward model is we can give students that sense of ownership. We can give students that sense of they're invested quite personally in their education. It's just that they're paying for it through philanthropic gifts after they graduate.
Two other questions, then we'll go to 2 questions from the audience. The first one is, again, for you, Matt. I want you to talk a little bit about, you're now, how many years into the kind of pilot version of Pay It Forward?
Close to 4, so the original cohort will graduate in May.
So you've seen, you got 4 years of experience with this. Tell me what's different about the students who come to your school or the experience of being at the school as a result of this program. What's it changed about Hope College?
A lot. I'll be really brief. I think we're looking at 5 big things that this has had an impact on, and there's a mix of some qualitative and some quantitative things. The first is access, and we've just seen that if you remove the cost barrier, it solves the access puzzle in a really dramatic way. Any way you measure diversity, these 120 students, it just goes through the roof. Socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, geographic diversity, it's just through the roof in terms of solving the access part of it. What I was just touching on there is there's also a really interesting thing that happens when the relationship is based on generosity and gratitude. There's something really interesting that happens for one's mental well-being. There's lots of research. In fact, the CDC has studies showing a negative correlation between debt, and they actually, in particular, focus on student debt. So there's a negative correlation between the amount of debt you have, in particular student debt, and your mental well-being. And we'd love to be able to show the opposite, that because these students don't have debt, they have a better sense of well-being. And further, as I was saying, because the institution has said we believe in your future so much, you have a better sense of self-worth. So those are sort of qualitative things that we're measuring, but it's pretty palpable. In terms of academic outcomes, I think one of the main criticisms I got of this up front is the idea that if the price is 0, it will somehow devalue the education, or somehow that students won't take their education seriously if they're not paying for it up front. We've actually seen the complete opposite. The students who are part of the Hope Forward pilot, their GPA is significantly higher than the rest of our students at Hope who are on the tuition-based model. So the learning outcomes are higher. Retention is through the roof. We wanted to see that higher retention. If a student drops out of college, the #1 reason you drop out is finances. Something changed in your finances, or you just stretched too thin at the beginning and you overextended. So the retention is through the roof. The learning outcomes are really strong. And then I think the last thing, and it'll be some years until we really can measure this. And by the way, like if nothing else, we're running, I think, a really interesting longitudinal study here. We really think these students can think, this is part of what you were touching on, Dr. Thomas, we really think these students can think differently about the kind of impact they can have on the world because they're not burdened by debt. And I hear this anecdotally from students all the time. I have lunch with students in the cafeteria at least 3 times a week, and I love to ask the same questions. I got 3 or 4 questions that I love to ask. I love to ask the same questions over and over again because then you can get compare and contrast answers. And one of the questions I love to ask is, what do you want to do after you graduate? And I always use the word want, and one of the common responses is, well, what I want to do is different than what I feel like I have to do. And what we're seeing is that student debt is skewing the kind of things students are doing after they graduate. And students will say, I really want to work for this nonprofit or do this ministry thing or it's something that doesn't have as high a salary, but I've got $50,000 of debt, and so I'm going to chase this other career path in order to pay off my debt. So what we're seeing is that students are chasing income rather than pursuing impact, and that's a problem. It's a problem. It means that that our funding model for higher education is skewing the kind of things students are pursuing after they graduate.
Dr. Thomas, we've been on the stage for close to an hour, and there is a word that is normally used over and over and over again in any kind of conversation about public policy in this country, which has been uttered only once on this stage. It was by you, in passing. The word is government.
Mm-hmm.
We have been trying to come up with a problem to solve a crisis in higher education, and we have not mentioned government. And I'm wondering, is the era of looking to government to try and solve higher ed's problems over? Do we have to move on from the notion that we can look to Washington to help us? Because there's a version where Washington could bring a lot of colleges up to $1 billion.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. At least at the federal level, I don't think that government will produce the answer for higher education in this country. I would put much more attention and stock in local government than I would in federal government. Not to be cliche-ish, but we'd have to hope for truly government by the people. We need much more civic engagement in the conversation about what is high-quality education and what does it mean for our local viability and vitality. But I don't see government as a solution now.
Is that a good? It strikes me in some senses, listening to the two of you, that maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's time for these worlds. Maybe maybe government and higher ed are like an old married couple that's been bickering for so long that one of them needs to take a vacation.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I mean, for example, you would never get out of government the hope experiment.
Yeah.
Close as you might get is this idea of free community college. Maybe. But I don't think you would get 4-year college supported at that level. Even with the positive results that Matt has shared that he's already seeing. Retention rates, that'll translate into graduation rates. Learning outcomes. It's not going to come from a government solution.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think, I guess I have 2 thoughts. One is that I think we've got 2 parties right now. One party is basically saying government is the problem and we got to destroy it. Even if there's things government's doing that are helpful, just destroy it. And there's another party that basically says government's the solution to everything, and we ought to get government, we ought to support government as the solution, even if it doesn't necessarily work. And I think we need some nuanced thinking. We need some nuanced thinking to say maybe government can be part of the solution here, but maybe we need to rethink it over here. So I think we need some nuanced thinking. That's point one. Point two is I think I totally agree with you that, from a federal perspective, it's a problem for democracy. It's a problem for free speech. If we have the federal government meddling in what can be taught and what cannot be taught in each classroom in the United States. So that's a problem. That's just a problem for democracy, a problem for free speech. And if the tide in Washington is going to change every 4 years or every 8 years, then like I don't want that. I don't want that tide changing. So I think we need. I think that aspect of. I think you're 100% right that it can't be. It can't be federal government meddling. I think what we've seen is really, really toxic and really. We're just taking a step back in terms of democracy and free speech. So I think government can maybe be part of the solution, but I think it's going to be much broader than just a government solution. It's going to be private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector, philanthropists. It's going to take a holistic approach to this. That's point one, and point two is I think somebody has to stand up for. We can't allow federal government to meddle in what's happening in classrooms all across this country.
Thank you, Matt. I think we have time to take some questions from the audience. We'd love to hear from you. And tell us who your question is addressed to.
Yeah. Do we have mic runners out there?
We do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good evening, panelists and moderator. My name is Dylan Legend. I'm a sophomore, political science major from Atlanta, Georgia, and I attend Morehouse College. I want to start by saying thank you. This conversation was definitely very interesting. I don't think I could have foreseen anything like this being implemented anywhere. So my question is based around the conversation. So I hear a lot of talk about the impact that this can have on college students, perhaps increasing their worth in themselves by putting an investment in them. I want to ask President Scoggin, right? Did I say that correctly?
Scoggin, but I'll take anything.
I'm sorry. I want to ask, do you see this model being the catalyst for any changes on the fundamental level of college? Like, do you see it changing how we view college, like, as a whole?
I think the answer is yes. I think, as I said earlier, I think the fundamental purpose of college is to be an institution that incubates hope. And what I mean by that is problem solvers, people who can go out into the world and run toward big challenges, not run away from them. And so I think this model helps advance that. It gets us closer to an educational model that is advancing that. As the price of tuition has gone up, students have become customers, and that's really toxic. It's really toxic for a learning environment if you view your student as a customer. You know, the old adage in the business world, and I worked in the business world, so it's not like I think this is a bad sentiment, but the adage in the business world is the customer is always right. Well, if you think of your student as a customer, it can't possibly be the case that the student is always right. First of all, that if you were always right, you wouldn't need an education. Like, it's your wrongness that is presumably why you showed up to college in the first place, so you could learn. So, I think things like grade inflation is a function of colleges treating students like customers. I think this sort of crazy arms race around amenities on college campuses is a function of colleges treating students like customers, and all of that is completely ancillary to the whole purpose of college, which is providing an education so that students can go out into a world that is drowning in despair and go out into that world and bring hope to it. And that's what colleges are really good at. My favorite day of the year by far is move-in day, when freshman students move in. And it's this day that's filled with all kinds of emotions, some positive, some negative. And underneath all the emotions of that day is this really strong, palpable sense that something new is beginning, that what lies ahead is better than what came before, and this strong sense that anything is possible. And the name of that sense is hope. It just is. And that's what colleges like ours can provide, is giving students a sense of personal hope so that they can go out into the world and bring hope to this world that's drowning in despair.
Hello, my name is Eugene Sutton, and I'm here with some other trustees from Hope College on the Board of Trustees. I want to ask a question about the tension between tradition and innovation when it comes to the student body. I came to Hope College in early 70s from inner city Washington, D.C., and Dr. Thomas, what you said about your desire to go to Morehouse and you end up at Yale, but you always had the feeling that I'm in somebody else's house. I had that feeling. It's a little less so these days, I'm happy to say, but all throughout my 4 years, there's a sense that I'm not sure I really belong here. This college wasn't set up for me. And I'm wondering if some of the resistance to a hope forward kind of model is we're not sure we're going to get the kind of student that this institution was made for. And it's going to be a little different, I suppose, with each of you, because Morehouse, part of the mission is to educate and form black males in America. In an increasingly diverse country, what are the pressures on that? And are there any pressures for even Morehouse to be more diverse? And will you get the right kind of student if 10% of the students who say, I want to do that, are Asian or white students? And what would that mean for Hope College? And is some of the resistance of, well, this college was made for Dutch immigrants in the 19th century. At Yale, we're not going to get the country club people. Or at Fordham University, not just Roman Catholics. You get what I'm saying. Can each of you talk about the tension in your missions with educating the population of the future?
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot there. First of all, the way I think about it at Morehouse is that part of that, we have a clear set of values, and if you don't buy into those values, it'll be pretty clear that this is not the right place for you. So it doesn't matter what race you are, and not all of our students identify as African American, by the way, and that's been the case throughout our history, except for a period when the state of Georgia said whites couldn't go to black schools. But otherwise, there's always been a racial mix here. But people do have to buy into some things. If you have no stomach for hearing about black history, black progress, seeing symbols of that, then your experience will be similar to mine at Yale, where when you walked into the Hall of Fame, there were no people who looked like me. There is a tension, and I can tell you that the biggest resistance, at least here, I believe, to us becoming more diverse is going to be our alumni, right? We haven't seen it so much around race, but sexual orientation has been a tension in our community. we've had to deal with it and try to figure out how to embrace it. One of the first policies that I had to oversee the development of when I got here had to do with, will we admit transgender men? And we surveyed the community and there was no consensus. So we wound up with a policy that is the David Thomas policy because there was no consensus. And I sat in this room with a group of about 200 alumni at homecoming, one of whom got up and told me that I was sending the institution to hell because my policy said, we will admit those who identify and want to live their life as men, regardless of their assigned sex at birth. That's our policy. The policy also said that if you reach a point where you transition from male to female, you're no longer entitled to continue to matriculate through Morehouse College, because we're a men's college, a college for men. That was controversial. As a result, I think, we're actually better off. Hasn't created any other fears people had. We didn't go to hell.
Not yet.
Not yet, but those tensions are there, especially when you're a storied institution that has a rightful claim to being successful. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
I'll react to that a little bit. First of all, Eugene, thank you for being here. Jimmy, Eric, we have 3 of our trustees from the Board of Hope College here who are traveling, my traveling fan base here. So thank you for being here. Yeah, I think, Eugene, you're asking about sort of what do we do about people who resist maybe changes in the demographic nature of a student body, and further, what do we do about, an interesting thing about college is you have colleges as a community, is you have different vintages of graduates who may have experienced the college differently during different time periods, and you may have people who say, I graduated in this particular year and I want to preserve what the college was in that particular year. And this is going back to Malcolm's question about, do you need a sense of missional identity? This is precisely where I think the answer is yes, and that's, I think, why you need a sense of missional identity, is to navigate these kinds of, this type of resistance. My favorite topic lately is talking to our community. Again, for us, if we're going to be a Christian college, I think that means we have to take Jesus very, very seriously. And Jesus was a teacher. I believe he was more than a teacher, but he's not less than a teacher. And we've been saying, or I've been prompting our community to ask the question, what would it look like if we really modeled our pedagogy, our teaching methodology, who we teach, how we teach, and why we teach after Jesus? And if you look at who he teaches, I mean, it's still one of the most provocative things about his time on earth. We're still making Super Bowl commercials about it. We're still stunned by who Jesus hung out with. And I think if we're really going to follow the Jesus model, it's going to mean that we are radically inclusive. And I think for us, it stems very deeply from our sense of missional identity. And then to the point about preserving, if you get somebody who says, I just really want to preserve what the college was during my time at that college, again, I think, what we are going to preserve is our mission. What we are going to preserve is our identity. But things are going to change. You have to change because the world around us changes. And I think the way I like to think about that is Jesus was always looking forward. He was always looking forward, and we live in this moment where our politics is all about preserving. It's all about going back to something in the future. Apparently America was great at some point, and we have to make it great again. And that's just not the way of Jesus. Jesus is always looking forward. He has these lines like, if you have your hand to the plow and look backwards, you are not fit for the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus is always looking forwards, and at the end of his teaching, he always does the same thing with his students, is he sends them out, and what he sends them out to do is go out and create a better future. Go out, you bring healing, you bring justice, you bring forgiveness, you bring hope to the world. And so the teaching model of Jesus is always a forward-looking model. And I think for us, we can hang our hat on that. If we're going to be serious about this, we ought to model our teaching after the way he does it.
I'm reminded, I live not far from West Point, and someone invited me to speak to a class at West Point a couple years ago. And I went, and it was the most diverse, I mean this in the broadest use of that word, classroom I'd ever been in. I mean, kids from every corner of the world, every socioeconomic bracket, tall, short. I mean, and my first thought was, this looks nothing like a West Point class would have looked like 100 years ago. But it felt exactly like a West Point class. I mean, I wasn't there 100 years ago, but I imagined it felt exactly the same way. And I think it goes to the point the two of you are making, which is that culture can endure even as the kind of person who participates in that culture might change. And that's any institution that can do that, as West Point has, as Hope as Morehouse has, I think can pull this off. Other questions? We have time for maybe one more.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Quick. I'm a junior English major from Vallejo, California. I have a question for the both of you guys. One being, you mentioned the class of 2019 and the debt-free with Mr. Smith. My question to you would be about, have you seen any progress or increase of gifts being given back from that class? Because I know you mentioned the 40%, less than 40% from the.
Yeah. 2 years ago, the class with the highest rate of giving back to Morehouse was the class of 2019. A higher percentage of graduates in that class donated to Morehouse than any other class. I don't know what the most recent numbers are, but 2 years ago, they had the highest giving rate.
Okay, that's cool. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then to you, sir, you mentioned kind of this notion of to create gratitude, to give the gift initially. Me being a student, current student, and being around current students, I understand that, as younger kids or younger people, I mean, just our generation, sometimes we're expecting just to get these things. We're called the microwave generation, that we're just expected to get these things and that's that, So what is the plan in terms of ensuring that these gifts are given back, whether it's, and I know you said monetarily, is that money or is that land or is that giving your time? Like, how would that work in reality?
A gift could be all of the above or something else that we haven't even thought of. I think it's a really interesting question. Your question is, what is our plan for ensuring that students give gifts? And in some ways, our plan, if you're really hounding students to give gifts, well, then it's no longer a gift. It's some weird obligation. And I think we want it to be a light touch because we want it to truly be a gift that's given out of generosity. So that students who are part of this program have signed a document. It's not a legally binding contract. We call it a covenant. And what they've committed to in that covenant is to give something. We don't specify an amount. We don't even suggest an amount or a percentage of income, nothing like that. What they've committed to is to give something every year for the rest of their lives. And that's the commitment they make. And as soon as we say, oh, you've committed to give a gift, and we suggest this amount, and we're going to chase you all the time to remind you that you're supposed to give this amount, well, then all of a sudden it doesn't feel like a gift. All of a sudden it feels like a different flavor of a student loan bill. And that's what we're trying to move away from. We think something powerful happens when you move away from a system based on bill paying to a system based on gift giving. And so, yeah, I think we can remind people that they've made this commitment. There's a soft way of doing that, but I think it is going to be that. It's going to be a soft touch because we want it to truly be a gift that's given out of generosity. And I really like the accountability that puts on us as a college. Because at the end of the day, it means that the burden is on, right now we have students and families saying, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment from all these tuition dollars I'm paying? Well, what I like about our model is we're flipping it. The burden shifts to us. We have to make the education so good that our students are grateful for it after they graduate. And the natural manifestation of that gratitude ought to be giving. And I'm confident that'll be the case. But I like the accountability of putting it on us first. We got to make the education really, really good, and we got to support our students well as they're launching into the world. And I think the natural response to that will be gratitude.
Okay. I think I will assume the plenipotentiary powers of the presidency here at Morehouse. I think we're at the end of our question and answer period.
Yes, I was just coming right then.
No?
Yeah, you were right.
Oh, okay. Well, let me first of all thank all of you for joining us. I know at least some of you are aware that there's a reception at the President's house following this event. Hopefully we'll see a number of you there. It's right on the other side of campus, not far away. Malcolm, I want to thank you for having the idea to bring us together. Matt, thank you for making it all set in motion and happening. And if nothing else, hopefully we've inspired some of you to think in new and innovative ways about this important question related to how do we continue to provide high quality higher education to all the constituencies in our nation. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Jasmine, if you want to close us out.
That was good enough for me.
Okay. We are done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.